Welcome to Face to Face. This is a show about change and about what's next. It's a show that wants to ask questions, peel back the layers of our average everyday experience, and go beyond scratching the surface. We interview amazing people with incredible ideas and stories who have done wild, weird, and wonderful things. Remember that imagination shared creates collaboration, and collaboration creates community, and community inspires social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face to Face. Well, welcome to Face to Face, and we are joined by a special guest today, Scott Presse, who is a sales management consultant. And I've got some interesting questions for him, I think, today about relationships and about leadership. Scott, thanks for joining us today.
Good.
Yeah. So we've just been talking about Scott and his ability to fall asleep during movies in the movie theater. So he's clearly not a film buff, but I think he's going to have some insight into what he calls implementing growth strategies for, I guess, a variety of companies.
Yes, anything from large Fortune 100 companies all the way down to small, medium-sized businesses, but all in the area of sales and marketing. That's the growth part of it. How do they grow their business? And often at the heart of that is leaders with a big idea.
With a big idea. So you've been working, so DSG Consulting is the company, for those of you out there that are interested. You've been with them 16 years, but you're a Canadian consultant. You work out of your own office, virtual kind of.
That's right.
And you move around.
That's right. Most of our clients are European or US based, but they have international sales offices. And so a lot of my work then is done with regional managers across APAC, Latin America, EMEA.
So do you work with startups? Do you work with people, entrepreneurs, people just getting out of the gate, or?
Not at the small point.
Yeah.
No. We're really, and my interest is in helping leaders move large organizations. And so this aspect of consulting really came to me over 20 years ago when I began to realize that helping high performers get better was at the heart of my passion, and that I had a bit of a vision that was of a large ocean liner and a captain on the ocean liner, and it was having to navigate through some circuitous routes. And so I instantly recognized that was very much like leaders in large organizations. They're having to nimbly move an organization to adapt to change. They're having to get a large number of people aligned around a vision of what that new port would look like. And so I work with DSG, and we've been in business over 20 years, over 200 clients, over 500 individual projects. But my own personal company, and really my personal mission, I call Newport.
Oh, okay.
Because it's built around that vision of that captain of a large ocean liner trying to move its way to a new port.
I do a newsletter every couple of weeks, for those of you who don't know, called Splash and Ripple. You might want to check it out on newsana.com. But I was just reading an article this morning about how most companies want to renovate, not innovate, which I thought was kind of fun, kind of an interesting title. And the idea is that you get caught in basically, I guess, doing things the way they've always been done.
Right.
You're a little risk adverse, don't want to take that step. And so I guess it's talking to somebody who's, I guess, is a good leader who is being challenged in a particular way, maybe had a few mistakes, maybe made some bad choices, didn't succeed in these sort of new entrepreneurial initiatives. Okay, I'm going to go back to what works.
Right.
Is that pretty common, would you say?
Well, the pull of the status quo is huge. And there was a book written about 10, 15 years ago called something Navigating the Hairball. And it was a vivid metaphor, and the hairball being the values, the practices, the policies, the processes that have been present over time and have accumulated.
The administration, the bureaucracy, potentially in a huge
That's right.
company.
The way we do stuff.
Yeah.
And so I find very innovative leading companies today that we're engaging, some that are historic and 100 years old, some that are but 25 years old, that leaders have big ideas. They know how they want to grow. They often don't know how to implement that growth. And that really is my role as a consultant, is that people, whether it be managers and or sales and marketing personnel operations, they need to know where they need to go. So there's a strategy element that I help my clients with. They typically are having to learn how to sell differently, and essentially
Sell their Scott, sell their product, or would you say also sell their board, internal? Is it a bit of both? Is it kind of internal, external?
well, leaders are having to drive change, yes.
Right.
And so there's a combination of those things. But typically, it's one of the organization as a whole.
Right.
That they're having to get on board to drive that level of change. So the people in the field, in the office, below the board and the executive team that says we're going to grow this way, this much by this time. They're really great at making pronouncements of what kind of growth they want, how to do that, and how to implement that in the field. Usually requires strategy, usually requires new processes, new messaging, because they're often having to sell differently to different buyers and to differentiate their products and services. And at the heart of all of that then is leaders, and how leaders are at the front of driving that change forward. So there's a cascading effect of enabling leaders to understand what the change is and the business mandate. And often the business mandate isn't all that clear. And so in the face of that, why do we really have to change? How do you want us to change? Are two questions I help through a variety of workshops and communication pieces, and then ultimately in training, to get people to understand the business imperative around that change, to understand why that change is important for them to implement with their teams, and then how to do that. What are the actual change priorities from a skill standpoint?
I guess as a possible corporate leader or a nonprofit leader or whatever it is, whatever kind of change you're moving that cruise ship in, that ship, that new port that you're heading towards, it looks pretty big. Like, why bother, right? It's, so you got your visionary who wants to do this and then looks to the left and says, okay, here's the to-do list, here's the whiteboard. How are we ever going to get there? Mm-hmm. This is a 5-year plan. This is 10 years. And, my work in the nonprofit sector, people, it seems, want change pretty quickly, mm-hmm. right? Let's see where this is actually. Show me that this is going to work, and then maybe I'll follow.
Yeah, everybody listens to the radio station called WII-FM. What's in it for me? So they're translating these things in terms of how does this change impact me? And for a period of time, I remember I was working with nonprofits and had a group of more senior level people, and this is probably now 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I had them in a room, and we were trying to vision and prioritize and create a sense of a roadmap for driving change forward. And I was using some technology, keypads essentially, that allowed them to discuss what they were going through and what their decisions were, and then ultimately to vote on them and to prioritize them in a way that was anonymous.
Interesting.
And so,
do you still use that?
I haven't used it now. I use various other methods, but I've just found that in the dynamic world that we have today, people are more than ready to give forward their answers, and there's less corporate pressure to vote like the boss votes.
Right.
But as I handed out these pads, this individual said to me, he said, "What is that?" And I said, "Well, it's tied to my computer, and it allows you to, communicate your thoughts and feelings." Computers, yeah, that's why I lost my job. And so that's a 20-year retrospective
Sure.
of
Yeah.
of how somebody is translating change, because it impacts
Yeah.
them very personally, and
Sure.
even the medium then becomes a barrier for adoption.
Right.
But in every case, what we find is that leaders have really three roles. One is thought leadership. The other is process leadership. And the third is change leadership. So thought leadership is usually the easy part, whether it's truly innovative or not. Nevertheless, most leaders, by the nature of taking on the various roles that they have, know what they want and tell other people what to do. Okay, that's the easy part. Process leadership is a little bit harder, and is the way in which leaders establish a culture for how things are going to be done differently.
Right.
So they put in process and policy, and essentially create structures for doing things a certain way. And that often means telling people to establishing disciplines and practices that are different than what they're doing before. That's a hard one, and I teach to the best practices around leadership in
That could
helping
be
drive
that's
that.
a rock of a hill in some cases, I would think, wouldn't it be? I mean, I know with the larger nonprofits, you talk about, oh, hey, you know what, you guys need to do this, or what about a campaign, or what, and you talk to the leaders, you talk to the presidents of some of these organizations, and we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, and they'll say, listen, it's taken 2 years to get one of my ideas rolling here.
Right.
Never mind yours.
Yes.
Right? And they're not necessarily being negative. They're just saying, hey, this is the ethos. This is the culture. This is what I'm fighting against personally. They might be on board, but they got all these other people to line up.
Right. And so thought leadership typically causes them to be making announcements and pronouncements and give guidance, but not essentially create disciplines and practices that are going to incrementally allow people to understand the new normal and to develop the skills and motivations
It's good. Understanding the new normal's good.
in which to execute that. And then the third element is around change leadership. And change leadership is the hardest thing to teach, because it is very interpersonal and intrapersonal. And so it's part of understanding how is your team adapting, what have been some of the cultural norms, how do we help people adjust to feeling like their job has changed, or they're at risk, or that this is not the way they've been successful in the past. And so helping them do that. So the whole aspect of the engagement with people around their motivation and their focus and their priorities in a way that is interpersonal as well as process oriented.
It sounds like there's a connection to mentorship there of some kind. It seems to me, or at least coming alongside others. And so, I remember somebody once saying to me, a good leader is just somebody who's they're good people. They're friendly. They're easy to get along with. They share. They include. They embrace. So I see the CEO. I see the president wandering around, shaking hands. Hey, how's it going today? This kind of thing. Is that kind of approach going on in the larger corporations enough? Is that we talk about it being all about relationships, but is there a leaning towards mentoring? Would you say, or is it a little more process, a little more admin like in that sense?
Good leaders build teams. And so whether it is an executive with their board, and the board is obviously brought in to create checks and balances with a leader, so that it's not a theocracy of one.
Right.
It's a not a democracy, but at least it's a benevolent form of leadership that a board is working with. So leaders have to understand how to draw on the checks and balances of their board, so that there is teaming And that is a critical issue. It's a real challenge. The best leaders work with their boards in ways that both keep them honest and accountable, but also enable them to work with it. And then similarly, with their executive staff. So those leaders are the extension of that strategy. And so the way in which they engage them both personally and professionally and ensure that there is alignment, that it's not just compliance. So change leadership is getting to the focus of the motivation and capacity of the individual, not just the compliance and the rigor of a discipline against a set of expectations. So, Jack Welch said that the job of every leader is forming strategy, improving operations, and thirdly, recruiting and building a great team. And so I find that to be absolutely true, that the most effective leaders create alignment around what and why, so that their extended teams are in a position then to equally represent that change, model it, coach it, practice it, and to the degree that is important, mentoring. I was working with a software company that sells to airlines, airports, and governments. And so if you've lost your luggage, their software is probably giving you announcements as to where it is and where to come pick it up. And so I was working with a Middle Eastern team. And so the dynamics of a Middle Eastern environment is much more tribal, not to be, kind of inappropriately describing that, but I mean literally from the voice of this leader, he said, this is my team, and there was a real sense of blood brotherhood around how we're working across our region. And he said one of the things that he said that was critical was he is always preparing the person to take his job. He finds one, he's got to build a team, but he finds one that is going to be able to take his job. And so he equally...
So succession plan is already very much in this guy's mind.
Very much so. Very much so. And that is a critical piece for leaders, just because of the dynamics of millennials today, the intransigence and the degree to which their time and attention changes dramatically. And they're not willing to sell their soul to the organization. So being able to identify top talent, working with Korn Ferry, the premier executive search firm, as well as with other human capital companies, talk about the fact that in any significantly sized organization, there are probably 5 future CEOs. And the question to the board and to the executive team is, do you know who those are? Have you identified them? How are you nurturing them? How are you giving them a series of crisscross challenges from field to headquarters, back to field, back to headquarters, from culture to culture? How are you giving them new challenges that are essentially preparing them for that not only that next level of leadership, but given the potential trajectory of that leadership?
Seems to me that a mentorship program, and here we go, taking something that's relational and turning it into a process, would probably speak into that to some degree. The better you know your team, or at least the people below you or working alongside you, the better, I would think, equipped you are to say, this person's got the skills we need, or the qualities we need, or they could be mentored, or they can be what was groomed used to be the expression. I don't know if that's the expression.
Well, the HR term today is called engagement. Okay, so employee engagement is a real and measurable dimension, and so employee satisfaction scores are but the tip of the iceberg as to how engaged your team is. So talent management as a whole builds on a base of HR best practices for employee engagement that is also about development in general. It's about culture, but it's about finding high potentials and giving them the series of tasks and opportunities and relationships to advance more quickly and or to the degree that their own personal motivations keep them engaged and accelerating in their overall performance.
So are good leaders born, or are they made over time? And it's
Well, there are certainly personality traits that give one the qualities by which people respond to what they say and follow what they do. So, yes, there are personality dimensions that are inherent. And yet, the thought process and change leadership issues are clearly learned and cultivated over time. And the good ones bring increasing levels of capability, mostly born through experience.
and isn't there something there too about a good leader getting the right people in place? So the skill or the strength that the leader doesn't have, they say, you know what, this is out of my frame of reference. We need this person in place. We need a better manager here. We need somebody to help me, to come alongside me and prop me up.
Yeah, and that's where recruitment is. The skill of recruitment is important because you're often making decisions based on personality, and you're often the things that you do well by way of motivation and personality style you tend to value in others. So you get people who are a lot like you, as opposed to being more conscious about what are the team gaps and the leadership traits that are necessary for that.
I want to ask you about some distinctions between for-profit and non-for-profit in a couple of minutes. But do you think that, I mean, I certainly know a lot of nonprofit leaders who make decisions based on personality. And I took the more pejorative sort of angle to that and said, maybe that's not what you meant, but, oh, I don't really like this guy, so therefore he's not going to be on the team. Or this woman really grates on my nerves, so therefore she's going to go to marketing and communications because I will have nothing to do with her. But the truth might be that that's exactly who this person might need on the team. Does that come up very often?
Yeah, both sides of it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, it's both sides. It's I choose people who I like, and I don't choose people who I don't like, as opposed to a better sense of what are the functional and strategic capabilities necessary to move forward, and therefore who would be best to fill out the team.
So when you say both sides, you mean both nonprofit and for-profit?
Yes. Yeah.
Happens everywhere. It's human nature.
It's a human nature issue.
Yeah. So tell me about the distinction, your take on the distinction between a good leader and a manager, or are they both? And that whole sort of visionary versus the to-do lister.
Yeah.
The person who loves to tick the stuff off. No, you need to be out meeting clients. You need to be out shaking hands with other presidents. You need to be meeting other nonprofit leaders. That's your role. Capture, get everyone, become an evangelist for your organization, and then let everyone else get the stuff done, the nitty gritty, the details. And yet, it seems to me, again, a lot of nonprofit leaders spend most of their time spinning their wheels, ticking things off their to-do list.
Yeah, the leader versus manager is an age-old contrast.
Right.
And so I have pretty well, in working with sales and marketing leaders, broken it down to those three dimensions of thought, process, and change. and just simply said, in order to lead others, you've got to do all three. And you're going to have a natural, you may be a more relational kind of person that's going to be great in supporting people in a changing environment. But if you can't give them guidance and direction, and if there's no vision, there's no place to go. You can have great ideas, but if you can't put any disciplines and practices into an operational framework, then
Right.
you're not going to get very far along that way. And similarly, you know, today's normal may prove true for 6 months or 12 months or 18 months, but something big changes. And now you've got to bring a dimension of change leadership that's very different. So leaders, good leaders who enable change in their organizations and in their marketplaces are able to bring about all three.
I remember working with a friend of mine, actually. A friend of mine who has a company, started with his brothers, actually, coming out of high school, and they've turned it into a $40 million company, Texas. It's out of Montreal. And he said to me, you know, he does some nonprofit work, sits on a few boards, and Peter Burton's his name. And he said, you know, David, you got to hire great people for So Change, for my company, my consulting firm. And yeah, you know what, Peter, that's, you know, I love it. I'm with you. A little tougher in my world than I think in your world, only because you probably have a bit more capacity, a few more funds to play with. Your budget's a little bigger. So I wonder if you could talk about that distinction, the great good distinction, a little bit. And how essential is that, would you say, for startups, for nonprofits, for anyone who's trying to make a difference in this world, whether it be a corporation or you know, an environmental Engineers Without Borders?
Well, most innovation and most entrepreneurs have a passion for something, and in most cases are pretty good at communicating it. And so the challenges in the building up of the processes to make it work. And so one of the groups, as I began my professional career in earnest, you know, 20, 25 years ago, worked primarily with small business people. And one of the things he said was, don't do anything that you're not excellent at, and get somebody else. Pay people to do what you can't do well. Because if you do what you do well, you will generate revenue. And then you pay the people to do well what you don't do. And I can't...
I think you need to tell my wife this. We're doing some home renovations right now. There's a few things I don't do well.
Right, right. Well, it really helped me make some good decisions in the early stages of building my consulting practice, because I've both been an independent as well as now having worked in association with DSG for some 20 years. And that was, I just recognized early on I needed to, the whole financial aspect, I needed to pay money for an administrator and a bookkeeper, because any time I spent on it, I wouldn't do it well. It would completely drain me. I'd hate every second of it. And it would keep me from doing what I really enjoy doing and do well.
I mean, when I don't know. I'm, you know, been struggling with a small business for 5-6 years, and I sometimes wonder, from the other friends and people I know that are doing the same thing, if it's those kinds of tasks, those kinds of responsibility that actually break you down. And finally you say, what is it, 400,000 businesses fail every year in Canada?
Sure.
That's why I'm done. I'm out. I can't do it. I don't know how to do I don't know how to post my blog, but I can't afford to pay somebody to do it for me.
Right. Yeah, and that's always a startup dilemma and an early stage formation dilemma.
How do you keep all those balls in the air and still sleep at night?
Yeah, you You can't. You can't effectively. I mean, early on, I recognized that in the consulting business, that there's a waxing and waning. You bag a big client, and that's great. Now you deliver, day and night for an extended period of time, and then the project ends, and you don't have anything in your pipeline of new opportunities. And so now you go into a business development cycle, and now you're in struggle. And so, that was part of the decision I made was in joining DSG was to recognize there's an administrative bookkeeping function I'm willing to pay for, and I can find somebody who can do that effectively. The leverage that comes from a business development function is why I joined a group of people to work with for that specific purpose, was to leverage my individual capacity so that I wasn't having to be the sole generator of new business. I could draw on leads and opportunities coming my way and get into more balanced cycle of sell, deliver, sell, deliver, sell, deliver.
So hire the professionals, basically, is what you're saying, when you need them.
And decide where there might be joint venture opportunities relative to things that other people are already doing in ways that you fit with what they do, and or the leverage of specific other individuals who are
Sure.
equally committed to an entrepreneurial phase of 1 to 3 years of getting something up off the ground.
Why did you leave working with nonprofits, or was that just a one-off?
It was just really a matter of my motivation was to help high performers to improve themselves even more. And so the characteristics of helping nonprofits is one in which the measures of success and failure are not that great, don't matter, are fuzzier. And though there's personal costs, and I know that from having spent the first 10 years of my career in a nonprofit orientation, was that, there's just not as much at stake. And so my personal motivation is playing in high stakes games. So I have clients tell me all the time, if this doesn't work, this is going to be a catastrophic failure for us and our $1 million, $100 million, multiple billion-dollar company.
And yet, in some ways, from a nonprofit perspective, you would think you would hear the president say, "Oh, gee, there's nothing more important than dealing with food security issues in Hamilton or clean water issues in Zimbabwe," right? So a lot at stake for others, and yet, what was the phrase you used? You're just fuzzier.
Yeah.
The measures of success are fuzzier. So I think things are changing. But still, it seems to me the nonprofit sector has a long way to go applying. We were involved in a situation recently working with an organization, and the moment we mentioned a baseline, eyes glossed over, and geez, well, that's going to take a lot of time and effort and work, and yet that's kind of what you need to start out of the gate to say, here's how we, to say to your donors down the road that we actually succeeded. So are you hopeful for the nonprofit sector, would you say, after the work that you did and what you've done now, and in sort of contrast to it?
Am I hopeful? I think there are just inherent challenges that don't change. I see, people who have gotten tired of the business environment and
We just had a little station identification break there. All right. So I love that phrase, inherent challenges that don't change.
Yeah. And so whether it's governments or NGOs or a variety of other nonprofits, what I do see is that people who have been in the business world and are coming back to a more fulfilling passionate personal environment are bringing a level of skills and focus and capabilities. And when you look at even the many individuals who have made their many multiple hundreds of millions of dollars, they're committing, the huge bulk of their revenue to driving change socially and economically across the globe. So there is funding that is increasing. There are funding accountabilities as people are looking for real return on investment in the nonprofit sector and not just charity. And to the degree that those are trends that are for the good.
So, believe it or not, we're kind of coming to the end of the interview today, and it sounds like we got a part 2 in the future. But you talked about, I think, millennials for a moment. You talked about a few minutes ago about how they're not going to buy in, they're not going to drink the Kool-Aid of the corporation. They're looking for something else, it seems, and there's certainly some thinking and writing, and I teach at Humber College, so I'm dealing with, I guess, quite a few millennials and get very frustrated with them on one hand, but yet I'm quite hopeful and encouraged on another, and I just wonder, where do you sit on that? I mean, is that a problem that you've got somebody who's working with you that's probably looking for a new job in 2 to 5 years, or does it just provide new challenges for companies and for nonprofits?
It certainly provides problems because it's traditional thinking applied to new realities, and that usually means that there's a fallout.
Right.
So as I work with firms that deal specifically with talent, that's one of the key issues that they're bringing is that millennials and even the younger generation are simply not wanting to bring their skills into a full-time employment environment. And so whether it's an SOW or an independent contractor, or whether it's some kind of multiple structured role of consultant, even retirees, in many ways, companies are realizing the value in retirees in bringing them back because of their skills and capabilities. So because of the nature of talent and the war for the right kind of talent that companies are trying to have to in essence fund their strategies. So it's just it's the new world of sourcing, and of course the business world has gone from staffing and outsourcing as a whole to now a much more blended version of there's things we can outsource to India, to Mexico, to China. There's things that we can get staff augmentation around people who have skills, whether they be retirees or others who simply want to come in for projects. So I just think it's the world of work, and for people who are managing human resources, that's the new job description is fuel our strategy with the talent we need and recognize that it's going to come, it's not going to look the same.
Not going to look the same in different places. Retirees is really interesting. Do you think there's something about tacit knowledge there? These folks have 40 years in the field. They understand it in a way that somebody doesn't, who's only been there to get that journeyman kind of edge.
Yeah, and there's very little that's noble about it. It's in some cases they can retire them, get them off the payroll, and then pay them on an hourly basis. So there's both innovation is often born out of necessity, right. And so cost containment becomes one of the realities of how do we fund our strategy with the right skills.
So one last question. I mean, I got lots more, but we'll have to save it for another time. But you're familiar with the triple bottom line: people, planet, prosperity. One of the mandates of the Liberal Party now. It's got that whole sort of the UN's Global Compact is speaking about it. 10 years ago there were, I believe, about 40 organizations that were a part of this the UN Global Compact. There's over 2,000 today. So it seems like things are changing. I talk all the time about my son Spencer, who gets upset with me for not recycling something. And so there's a shift, and people seem to be heading in a new direction. So we just, talking about millennials, innovation born out of necessity. Is the triple bottom line becoming something that is that people are buying into more, that people like you and I at our age and our demographic buying into, and saying, that is more, that things aren't change is more becoming, is coming out of noble causes, to use, your phrase?
Well, it certainly is an ethos, but Canada or North America is a pocket. It's a microcosm of a much bigger world, and so there's places where, as you well know, just basic prosperity in terms of clean water or antibacterial drugs, with mosquito nets would be an awesome form of prosperity.
Huge change and movement forward would happen as a result of some of those very simple things.
Yeah. So, when there was a period of my life where prosperity in and of itself was seen as somehow a necessary evil. But at the heart of what gets me up every day is the fact that I'm helping people to be successful in their jobs. I'm helping them to pay off their mortgage and send their kids to school and pay the bills. And in my work with teenagers and sports, my time and investment coaching not only my kid but some other kids whose parents never came to the games. And
you're a capacity builder, Scott. There's no question.
One of the young boys that I've coached for 4 or 5 years now has gotten a scholarship to go to a prep school in the U.S., which he would have never have gotten.
Yeah.
Now, I don't suggest that that's my as a result of me, but I got to help enable that.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I see the goodness in prosperity building personally and organizationally in all that I do, and that makes a big difference for me.
Yeah, little things, incremental change. Thanks again for showing me and hopefully my listeners that there's way more going on out there than meets the eye. And thanks for joining us today. Scott Presse from DSG Consulting. Check them out online, and we'll see you next week.